Hello, I'm Deputy Chief Constable Phil Cain of North Yorkshire Police. I'm the NPCC lead for Workforce, Representation and Diversity, as well as the Race, Religion and Belief Deputy Chair and lead for Internal Confidence. So I know that my colleague Chief Constable Andy Rhodes will be following shortly and will be speaking about wellbeing, but I want to talk to you all today as leaders about inclusion. It will not have escaped the attention of any of you that the last few months have been especially challenging for policing, not least because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of some wider issues around race that have affected policing internationally. The last few months have seen challenges around the Black Lives Matter movement and increased conversation about racism in the police service. These have been emotive and somewhat difficult times for all of us. It goes without saying that we're all proud to serve in the police, and we are proud of what that means to serve our communities and keep the public safe every day. So I'd like you to pause for a second now and take a moment to reflect on these headlines. How do you feel right now as a police officer in 2020? How does it feel when you hear another headline that portrays the police in a negative way? From a personal perspective, it really hurts me to see these headlines. I want to lift out of one of these and briefly touch on the story that was recently in the news about an MP who was stopped in a vehicle by police. The MP, who was a black female, felt that the police had stopped her because she had been racially profiled. This story has caused a great deal of controversy over police actions. An explanation was given at the time by the force responsible, which gave a reasonable explanation of the circumstances of the stop. And we can keep doing just that, explaining and justifying individual actions each time and then moving on. Or we can start to understand the wider issues and root causes that make someone feel this way. Why does a person from a BAME background who is stopped by police feel like this? Sometimes our natural reaction to this type of headline is to be defensive, but we need to pause and think about what is behind some of these stories, about the history of the police service in the UK. Whether or not you personally believe that the police as an organisation is racist, we need to understand why a proportion of the public feel that we are. We need to understand the history and the background to these headlines, the context, and then we can start to address it. Over the last few months, we have seen protests, video footage of officers being assaulted, controversy over officers' decisions to take the knee, coupled with the recent publication of the NPCC data, which has shown disproportionality in the issuing of COVID FPNs. This has been an incredibly challenging and sometimes uncomfortable time for policing. Many of you will have also seen the ITV poll, which was recently carried out and found that 77% of black people believe the police has a culture of racism, and that 59% of ethnic minority people and even 42% of white people believe that the police has a culture of racism. There's also been a more recent report by Hope Not Hate that was highlighted by both BBC News and The Guardian at the end of August. This report found that the majority of people from BAME backgrounds thought that the police overall were good, and that race issues were down to a few individuals within forces. But the BBC also reported that 4 out of 5 respondents of black and Bangladeshi heritage, and about half of those of Chinese and Indian backgrounds, feel that there is a bias against them. These figures are saddening for a modern police service. We are 27 years on from the murder of Stephen Lawrence and the Macpherson report that followed. And yet many of our ethnic communities still feel that the police is biased against them in some way. What we also need to consider are the other communities who may feel in a similar way. Other ethnic minorities, the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community, the LGBT community. We need to be alert to their thoughts, their feelings and their concerns. I would like you now to reflect upon how you could inspire confidence in your communities, your partners and your internal communities and workforce too. We need to be alive to the feelings of officers and staff within our organisations who are members of underrepresented groups. How must it feel to be a black and minority ethnic officer or an officer from the Gypsy, Roma, Traveller community or from the LGBT community and being conflicted by some of the negative reports in the media about how their own organisation discriminates against those from minority backgrounds? Some of you present today may have experienced some of those thoughts yourself. How must it also feel to be a white officer in the police service right now? How does it feel to have your decision making scrutinised and feel that everything you do is under the microscope? What is it like to feel that you are being accused of being racist or sexist or homophobic? How do we start to look at those issues and understand some of the complexities around inclusion? And how do we try to create a safe environment where we can discuss some of these thoughts, feelings and concerns in an appropriate way? And as leaders, we need to make sure that everyone in our organisations can come to work and be their best true self. You need to step into that space where you can encourage those safe conversations amongst your teams. The NPCC position, I'm sure you will have seen the recent statement from Chief Constable Martin Hewitt and Mike Cunningham, which talks about the plan of action for inclusion and race equality in policing. The statement covers the importance of listening to concerns and the crucial role that leadership plays in delivering this plan. The NPCC Diversity, Equality and Inclusion Strategy talks about three key components: our organisation, our communities and our partners, which are all underpinned by strong, visible leadership. And we have already produced the Workforce Representation Toolkit. As superintendents, this is the strategy that you need to be driving locally, and there are some key actions within this toolkit that relate directly to leadership. Simply attracting people to our service is not enough. The NPCC vision talks about a culture that values difference and diversity, as well as the ambition of attracting and retaining a workforce that will reflect its communities. So we need to make people feel part of our workforce, to feel valued, to feel included, a sense of belonging, no matter what their background. This is not just about recruiting people with protected characteristics. This is about inspiring real confidence internally and externally. And as I said just before, about making sure that everyone can come to work and be their best self. The National Inclusion Survey has recently been produced in conjunction with Durham University. And this showed some quite startling results. Over a fifth of police officers from a black and minority ethnic background who took part in the survey felt that their career promotion opportunities were negatively affected because of their race. Just over 8% of gay or lesbian police officers also felt that their career promotion opportunities were negatively affected because of their sexuality. And 38% of police officers who identified as having a disability felt that they had a negative effect on their career. The survey also looked at gender. 17.2% of male police officers who took part in the survey felt that their career promotion opportunities were negatively affected due to their gender, compared to a much lower figure of 8.9% of female officers. And this takes me back to my earlier statement. We need to consider the needs of everyone when we look at inclusion. Workplace incivility was also covered within the survey. and police officers reported experiencing higher frequencies of incivility than police staff, with 46.7% of officers and 38.2% of police staff reporting they had experienced not being listened to when expressing their views monthly or more frequently over the past 12 months. And over a third of police officers and staff reported that they had experienced being interrupted and not allowed to finish what they were saying monthly or more frequently over the past 12 months. As leaders, I would like you to reflect on your own environment. How can you develop a supportive culture amongst your teams where everyone feels like they have a voice, that their views are listened to, and that they all feel valued as individuals? Superintendents and chief superintendents are crucial to the developing culture and the working practices, and a culture that truly values difference and diversity. But in order to do that, you need to be able to educate yourselves and others and remove what I call the fog of ignorance. By that, I mean the fog that allows those who do not hold our shared values to be able to hide. We all need to educate ourselves as much as we can in order to understand some of the issues around inclusion. As senior leaders, you need to show strong and effective leadership. You need to lead by example, you need to be visible, to be clear, but you also need to be open. You need to be open to learning, to understanding these issues, and most of all, you need to help others to be open too. You need to create an environment where we can have safe conversations about inclusion, where people can ask questions and get the right information. I would like one of your takeaway actions to be look at your own environment, identify 3 ways that you can educate yourself to better understand the needs and concerns of those around you, and how you can help to educate others too. Inclusion has a direct link to well-being. Policing is already a challenging career, physically and mentally. But workplaces that are inclusive encourage positive well-being, and in return, those with high levels of well-being are more inclusive. But inclusion does not mean that everyone has to be treated in the same way. Real inclusion means treating everyone fairly, but recognising that people have their own personal needs in order to help them achieve their success. You may have seen the Channel 4 documentary, The School That Tried to End Racism. This was back in June. Within that was an incredibly powerful analogy of running a race. A similar video called The Race of Life has been available on YouTube for a few years. And I would like one of your other takeaway actions to be to watch that video. This video will be available today in the hub, and Superintendents Association will also share the details of the video in their next newsletter. It's only 4 minutes long, and I would really urge you all to think about the message that the video sends. We are all running our own race, but there are some people who we need the right support around them to get them to the starting line. A one-size-fits-all approach to inclusion is not enough. Think about what you can do to help everyone run a fair race. So finally, I will now hand over to Chief Constable Andy Rhodes, who will talk about well-being. I hope the last few minutes have given you some food for thought. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the time to speak to you.
Hi, my name's Andy Rhodes, Chief Constable Lancashire and National Lead for Oscar Kilo, the National Wellbeing Service. Thank you very much for inviting me back here yet again. It's been a privilege to speak to the Superintendent's Conference on many occasions over the last few years. And today, in the time that I've got, I'm going to give you an update around 4 things. The first one is an update on Oscar Kilo, where we're up to with the national programme, stuff that's relevant to you. Some of the National Wellbeing Survey headlines, it's the first one we've ever done. So I'm going to cover off some of the data that's come out of that I think is really interesting and will be fed into the Oscar Kilo programme. I'm going to talk about the next 12 months and also some of the lessons that we've learned around COVID, because obviously that's been a massive issue around the wellbeing and welfare of our staff. So the first thing with Oscar Kilo is we went live with the national service in April 2019. We have 8 live services. We have a fleet now of 10 vehicles. Some of you I know will have been involved in those vehicles when they come out there. We've already, prior to COVID, and we've started to get them back out now in the midst of COVID, we've actually done 10,000 psychological and health checks to people around policing. Our goal is to cover the whole of the 200,000 people who work in and around policing in this country with a health check, physical and a checkup from the neck up, as we like to say. They're going really well. I know staff associations, Police Mutual, financial health checks are also being done at those. They are the front end of the Oscar Kilo service and they're going really well. We've also developed, and this is a big focus for us moving into next year, and will feature in the police covenant, we believe, are occupational health standards. These are the basics, folks, of when you stick your hand up, and we know that there is a significant increase in people feeling confident to talk about mental health. They're going to get a good service off the right professionals, and they're not going to have to queue for 6 months to get it. So that is a piece of work that is a big part of our programme for next year. And we're also developing a trauma intervention programme, training for first line managers. That's not just the big bang jobs, which we tend to be quite good at. It's the day in, day out, drip, 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 traumatic events that really do get on top of our staff. So Oscar Kilo is into its stride. It's still early days, but we've got a lot of delivery out there, and we've got a lot of things in development that will be delivered in the future. I'll talk about those maybe in a while. The National Wellbeing Survey is, and you can see this infographic on the Oscar Kilo site. It's the first time we've ever done one nationally. It's part of our return on investment tracking for the National Wellbeing Service. 35,000 people answered the survey. That's massive. You're talking 18% nearly of our total workforce. Good representation from operational roles. What has it told us? Well, overall, PCs, police constables, have the lowest wellbeing. 45% of police report less than 6 hours sleep a night. So I'll repeat that. Half of our people are getting less than 6 hours sleep a night. At a supers conference I came to a few years ago, I did a straw poll about your sleep habits, because I'm notoriously have really bad sleep. And you all talked about sleep disruption, the nature of the job, being on call. Well, that is a big issue for us. And we have got a fantastic group of practitioners and experts now working on fatigue. I believe that is the next thing after mental health that we need to reduce stigma about. We've institutionalised fatigue. It's sort of accepted that everybody's exhausted. So people are reporting that in the survey, and it's really good evidence in terms of supporting what we're trying to do there. 67% of police officers and 50% of police staff are suffering some element of traumatic stress. Not necessarily a disorder, but we have seen reports and surveys and research in the past, not just here, but abroad. Cambridge University, Police Care UK's research that says as many as 1 in 5 are suffering from PTSD or complex PTSD. And, but on the positives, actually, they are reporting that they have autonomy. 65% of people have enough autonomy to do the job that reflects their values and beliefs. And, certainly in my own survey, in my force, and this is replicated nationally, we see above 90% reporting huge pride in the work. So people are tired, they're traumatised, but they're very proud. And I think, for you folks, thinking about how pride actually sometimes drives us to do things to go above and beyond, even when it's hurting us, is something that I think is an interesting area to talk about in the future. So what are the links to the DEI survey that Phil talked about? Well, clearly, to come to work and feel valued for being 100% yourself is really important, isn't it? We're hearing about high numbers of derogatory comments. And one that leapt off the page for me is that only, less than 50% of people feel confident enough to actually state what their sexuality or their disability is. on forms to their organisation. So we've got a significant amount of people who seem to be saying, I don't feel okay to tell you what's really going on in my life. And I think that Phil's presentation around the culture that we create, the behaviours that we have towards each other is really important. COVID, we've had fantastic support put in place. Hannah Wheeler, Owen Wetherill, Howard Hodges, Jason Masters, these are all your colleagues. They have done an amazing job. PPE, policy and testing, we've been in the thick of it supporting Telegold. What have we learned from that is that personalising our wellbeing approach and being flexible really can be done better than we've done it before. And I think, we've all hopefully benefited from that over the last sort of few months. Finally from me, what are we heading into next? I've mentioned fatigue. That's a big priority for us in 2021. We're going to be doing loads on that. We are linked into the police covenant, the officer and staff safety review. We're working with HMIC. We're actually embedded into the police uplift programme, the strategic HR review, and obviously we're looking at the NPCC operating model proposals as well, because wellbeing, folks, is here to stay. Thank you for supporting it. I know Paul and the team have done a massive amount of work within their own organisation to get the culture and the leadership right around supporting your wellbeing, and it hasn't gone unnoticed in the people who work for us. We are getting very good reports from the vast majority of our staff that the culture is starting to shift. Thanks very much.